Hello, dear music-loving listener. I will be uploading 24 new parts to my YouTube channel, and I'm calling this new project Bachmaninoff, and that needs some explanation. So I would like to read some things that I wrote back in 2015 when I actually created this music. It's almost 4 hours of music. It was 4 CDs at the time, and I had a little insert that I typed out some program notes, and I'd like to read some of those notes to kind of explain what you may decide to start listening to. The concept of alternating Bach Preludes and Fugues with works of Rachmaninoff has had an interesting genesis. In 2013, I recorded all 24 Preludes and Fugues of Book 1 of the Weltembr Clavier. That effort had been such a labor of love that I immediately wanted to begin work on Book 2. As I worked on Book 2 in 2014 and 2015, I realized it might be a good idea, for many reasons, to perform them for friends before recording them. But a program consisting only of Preludes and Fugues is a daunting prospect for both listener and performer, as wonderful as that music is. As a result, I came up with the idea of pairing 6 or 7 of the Preludes and Fugues with pieces in the same key by other composers for variety, as well as for relief from the extreme density and complexity of Bach's compositional style. This made for an ideal program of about 60 minutes. I chose Preludes by Rachmaninoff, since he, like Bach, also wrote 24, one in every major and minor key. When several private audiences seemed to like the pairings, I decided to record all 24 Bach Preludes and Fugues paired with Rachmaninoff works. But there was one snag in my idea. I feel that several of Rachmaninoff's 24 preludes are neither as excellent nor as interesting as the 16 that I had already played and recorded in the past. It occurred to me, however, that there were other works by Rachmaninoff, like etudes, transcriptions, so forth, that could cover those 8 missing keys. On these CDs, then, I have paired 21 of the 24 Bach Preludes and Fugues with works or portions of works by Rachmaninoff in those same keys. For the 3 remaining keys, which are E minor, B minor, and B major, I have resorted to using 3 other composers, Poulenc, Scriabin, and César Franck. To fill out the project, I have added a couple of extra Rachmaninoff works in duplicate keys and a couple of extra Scriabin preludes. In total, there are 52 works, 24 by Bach, 23 by Rachmaninoff, 3 by Scriabin, plus the Poulenc and the Franck. It is over 4 hours of music. Now a word about interpretation that I wrote back in 2015. Interpretations of Bach's keyboard music vary tremendously, if only because Bach left us with bare-bones scores, just the minimum information for recreating his music, the notes and the rhythm of those notes. Whereas all other major composers give interpretive suggestions, sometimes copious, for tempo, dynamics, articulation, mood, and character, Bach does so only rarely, especially in the Preludes and Fugues. Thus, considerable differences arise in performers' interpretive choices and outlooks. Very likely, Bach wrote the Preludes and Fugues for the harpsichord, which remains for some people the instrument of choice. The piano had already been invented, but it was in a rather primitive state of development, and Bach was only vaguely aware of it. Others prefer the piano because of its dynamic gradations, yet eschew the sustaining pedal because the harpsichord did not have one. For a number of reasons, I have chosen to use the pedal to add warmth and richness to the sound, a practice that seems to me no different from taking advantage of the piano's ability to inflect melodic lines and to discriminate various voices by dynamic contrast. I seek to employ the piano's full resources, but hopefully with enough discretion and discrimination to preserve the integrity of Bach's counterpoint and musical stylistic character. My strong opinion is that Bach's keyboard music has all the richness and emotional investment of his orchestral and especially his vocal music. It seems astonishing that Bach chose to even write such eloquent music for the harpsichord, which is virtually incapable of the kind of expressiveness that a violin, an oboe, or a human voice can produce. Although the piano also has its limitations in this regard, it comes much closer to communicating the glorious wealth of musical expressiveness hidden within those bare-bones notes. My ideal, then, is not to reproduce the sound that Bach would have heard from a harpsichord, but rather to create the sound that he might have imagined or that would have emerged had he written these works for orchestra or choir. The Baroque style, of course, must be taken into account, and my interpretations may strike some listeners as too 19th century or too romantic. But in my opinion, all great music has emotional depth, color, and content. I fail to understand the arid, impersonal approach sometimes heard in interpretations of Bach. Actually, the Baroque style was characterized by freedom, exuberance, and ornateness, in contrast to the more restrained style of the Renaissance or early classicism. I have tried to keep in mind that with 3 later centuries of even more obviously free and exuberant music embedded in my many years of musical experience, I could easily exceed what Bach had intended. But I like to think that the incredible clarity and complexity of his scores have kept me, gyroscope-like, in firm touch with his compositional approach and expressive intentions. As for the occasional alterations that I have made to the scores, like replaying long notes or introducing various slight additions or revisions, I introduced these changes solely in an effort to express the full character, as I perceived it, of what Bach had originally written. Something had tweaked my ear. For example, an emptiness in the sound due to the decay of long notes that spoiled a beautiful suspension or a moment of resolution. It is only with some reluctance that I have done this. Only when I believed that Bach himself might have approved the change did I proceed to make my alteration. Now, just a few words about the recordings that you'll be hearing, if you choose to hear. All of the works by Bach were recorded in my home on my 7-foot Shiguru Kawai. That was all in 2015. The Rachmaninoff and the other works are a mixed bag. Some were done on my piano, some come from concerts in various venues over the years, some are from 2015, and some I took from performances quite a long while ago. Thus, the piano sound and recording quality vary considerably. A suggestion for listening. I much prefer the purity and clarity of sound that come from using decent quality headphones rather than from exterior speakers. And lastly, some Bach testimonials from some rather interesting and important people. Here's one from Mozart. Now, there is music from which a man can learn something. Beethoven. Not Brook, but Ocean should be his name. He's referring to the fact that in German, the word Bach means brook. Robert Schumann. Music owes as much to Bach as religion does to its founder. Giuseppe Verdi. Oh, you happy sons of the North, who have been reared at the bosom of Bach, how I envy you. Johannes Brahms. Study Bach. There you will find everything. Richard Wagner. The most stupendous miracle in all music. Aaron Copland. If one were to ask to name one musician who came the closest to composing without human flaw, I suppose general consensus would choose Johann Sebastian Bach. And lastly, a quote from a Romanian philosopher, Emil, I don't know how to pronounce this, Cioran, perhaps? I love this. Bach's music is the only argument proving the creation of the universe cannot be regarded as a complete failure. Well, it is wonderful stuff, and as you decide, if you decide to go through and choose a key, and you'll have lots of variety. Hope you enjoy it.